I never imagined my sister's wedding would be the day everything changed, the day I saw my family for who they truly were, the day I uncovered the truth about Aunt Catherine's fortune. The morning unfolded in a whirlwind of chaos and excitement, with Amanda, my sister and the bride, at the center of it all. She barked orders, adjusted her designer gown for the 100th time, and ensured every detail of her extravagant wedding was flawless. Meanwhile, Sarah, the younger sister, was relegated to the background, assigned minor tasks that didn't interfere with Amanda's grand vision. "Sarah, where are the welcome bags for the VIP guests?" she snapped, barely sparing me a glance. Then, with a disdainful flick of her eyes to my feet, she scoffed, "And please tell me you're not wearing those shoes." I glanced down at my sensible heels, the best I owned. "They're fine, Amanda," I said, already exhausted. She rolled her eyes. "This is why Aunt Catherine always preferred me. You never understood class." The mention of Aunt Catherine made my heart clench. It had been 3 months since she passed, and the ache hadn't faded. Unlike the rest of our status-obsessed family, she had been different. She lived simply in her cottage, tending to her garden, always offering a listening ear. While my parents and Amanda chased prestige, Aunt Catherine taught me about kindness, hard work, and the beauty in simple things. Amanda sighed dramatically. "Thank God she left everything to charity like she always said she would. Can you imagine if she left it to you? You'd waste it on your kindergarten students or something equally ridiculous." I bit my tongue, unwilling to let Amanda's words ruin my memories of the one person in our family who had ever truly understood me. The wedding ceremony was set to begin in an hour at the Grand Plaza Hotel, an opulent venue that cost more than I'd make in years. As I adjusted the place cards at the reception, a distinguished-looking man in an impeccable suit approached. "Miss Sarah Bennett?" he asked, his voice formal yet kind. "Yes?" He reached into his briefcase and handed me an envelope, sealed with an old-fashioned wax stamp. "I'm Harold Winchester, your Aunt Catherine's attorney. She instructed that this letter be delivered to you precisely 3 months after her passing, on your sister's wedding day." My hands trembled as I accepted it. Before I could even process the moment, Amanda's sharp voice cut through the air. "Sarah, what are you doing? The ceremony starts in 45 minutes and..." She stopped short when she saw the envelope, her perfectly made-up face twisted with suspicion. "What's that?" "It's from Aunt Catherine," I murmured. Amanda's lips curled in irritation. "Oh, for God's sake, even dead, she's still causing problems. Just throw it away." "Sarah, this is my day." Our parents hurried over, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on?" Mom demanded, her critical gaze darting between us. "Aunt Catherine left Sarah a letter," Amanda said, exasperation dripping from every word, "and it had to be delivered today, of all days." Dad checked his Rolex, unimpressed. "Sarah, put it away. We have important guests arriving. The governor and his wife will be here any minute." For the first time in my life, I didn't obey. There was something about the envelope, the timing, the weight of it in my hands that told me this moment mattered. "I'm opening it," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Amanda lunged forward. "Don't you dare." I stepped back, clutching the letter. "You're not ruining my wedding with whatever nonsense that crazy old woman left you." The word poor nearly stopped me cold. How dare they? How dare they reduce Aunt Catherine to nothing when she had been more than any of them could ever understand? With shaking fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. Several documents slipped out, but my eyes locked onto the elegant handwriting I knew so well. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then I am gone, and your sister is about to marry the investment banker she believes will secure her the life she's always wanted. But before that happens, there are things you must know." I read on, my pulse roaring in my ears. Aunt Catherine had not been a modest woman living off a small trust fund. She had been the secret CEO of Montgomery Industries, a global empire spanning technology and real estate. The cottage, the garden, the quiet life, it had all been her choice. "While your sister and parents only saw my small cottage," the letter continued, "they never bothered to look deeper, to understand that true wealth isn't about what you show. But you, my dear Sarah, always saw me for who I was, not what I owned, and that is why I'm leaving everything to you." My breath caught as I scanned the documents. She had left me everything: the company, the estates, the investments. $89 million. Amanda's voice sliced through the haze. "What does it say?" she demanded, her tone shrill. "Sarah, what did that crazy old woman write?" I looked up, meeting my family's expectant, greedy eyes. And for the first time in my life, I held all the power. I looked up at my family, Amanda in her designer wedding gown, my parents draped in their finest attire, all of them staring at me with a mix of impatience and barely concealed contempt. I took a steady breath. Aunt Catherine wasn't poor, I said quietly. She was the CEO of Montgomery Industries, and she left everything to me. The silence was deafening. Amanda's face drained of color. Mom's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Dad stammered something about family obligations and sharing wealth, but I wasn't listening anymore. Carefully, I folded the letter and slipped it into my purse. Then, without another word, I pulled out my phone and ordered a car. Amanda found her voice first. "Where are you going?" she shrieked. "You can't leave. I'm about to get married. We need to discuss this." I turned to her, feeling stronger than I ever had before. "No, Amanda," I said, my voice steady. "You made it clear, this is your day, so enjoy it. I have other things to take care of." I walked out of the Grand Plaza Hotel without looking back, Amanda's furious screams echoing behind me, but for the first time in my life, they didn't matter. In my purse, tucked beside Aunt Catherine's letter, was a small brass key, the key to her cottage, but it wasn't just a cottage anymore, it was the key to my new life. At the hotel entrance, Mr. Winchester was waiting. "There's a car ready for you, Miss Bennet," he said with a knowing smile, "and the Montgomery Industries Board of Directors expects you tomorrow morning at 9. Your aunt spoke very highly of you." I nodded, my mind flashing back to all those afternoons in the garden. Aunt Catherine hadn't just been teaching me about herbs and flowers, she had been preparing me for this, teaching me about patience, strategy, and strength without cruelty. As the car pulled away, my phone buzzed with an onslaught of messages, calls from Amanda, voicemails from my parents, texts dripping with sudden, desperate concern. I powered the phone off. They had years to show me love and respect. Now, they had to live with their choices. The car carried me toward Aunt Catherine's cottage, my cottage now, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The next morning, walking into Montgomery Industries headquarters felt surreal. The towering glass building loomed above me, a symbol of everything I never knew my aunt had built. The security guard at the front desk smiled warmly. "Good morning, Miss Bennet. Mr. Winchester is waiting for you in the penthouse office." My office now. The top floor was breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city skyline, but what caught my eye wasn't the view. In the far corner of the office, just beyond the sleek mahogany desk, was a small herb garden. Even here, Aunt Catherine had stayed true to herself. "She tended those plants every morning," Mr. Winchester said, noticing my gaze, said it kept her grounded, reminded her of what really matters. I smiled, running my fingers over the delicate leaves. Aunt Catherine had always known who she was, and now, I was starting to know who I was, too. Before we could begin reviewing the documents, my phone buzzed to life. Despite being off all night, the sheer volume of missed calls and messages forced it back on. 47 missed calls, over 100 texts. And now, Amanda was calling again. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You ruined my wedding," she shrieked the moment I picked up. "Half the guests left after your dramatic exit." The governor's wife was asking questions about Aunt Catherine and Montgomery Industries. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was?" I leaned back in my chair, calm, steady. "I'm sorry your wedding didn't go as planned," I said, meaning none of it, "but I'm not sorry for opening that letter." Amanda's voice softened, slipping into saccharine manipulation. "We're family, Sarah. We need to discuss this inheritance together. Daddy's already talking to his lawyers. You can't possibly run a company this size, you're a kindergarten teacher, for God's sake." Mr. Winchester, who had been politely pretending not to listen, handed me a stack of papers. The top document made me smile. "Actually, Amanda, I can." Her silence was deafening. Aunt Catherine spent the last 5 years secretly training me. All those weekends I spent at her cottage, we weren't just gardening, she was teaching me about investments, leadership, and business strategy. She documented everything. A long pause, then Amanda's mask finally slipped. "You conniving little snake, you manipulated her, you turned her against us." I exhaled slowly, then, without another word, hung up. I had spent my whole life being the afterthought, the overlooked sister. Not anymore. I glanced out the massive office windows, taking in the world before me, the empire Aunt Catherine had left in my hands. This was just the beginning. And for the first time in my life, I was ready. We're going to contest this will. And when we win, you'll be sorry. I ended the call and turned to Mr. Winchester. They're going to contest the will. He smiled, unfazed. Your aunt anticipated that. Would you like to see what else was in that envelope? I hadn't even opened the remaining documents. My hands trembled as I did. Inside was everything, evidence of every time my family had tried to manipulate Aunt Catherine for money. Amanda's secret credit card debt. My parents' failed investment schemes. The most damning of all, proof that 2 years ago, they had tried to have Aunt Catherine declared mentally incompetent to seize control of her assets. She kept everything, Mr. Winchester said. Every email, every recorded conversation, every legal document. She wanted you protected. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. While my family filed their lawsuit, I immersed myself in learning the company. The board of directors, who had all known about my secret training, welcomed me without hesitation. Aunt Catherine's longtime assistant, Maria, became my right hand, helping me navigate the corporate world. Meanwhile, my family's case fell apart spectacularly. Their lawyers quit the moment they saw the evidence. The judge was particularly unimpressed by Amanda's tearful speech about family loyalty, especially after hearing recordings of her mocking Aunt Catherine's pathetic lifestyle. But the real reckoning came during a settlement meeting 1 month after the wedding. My family arrived with yet another lawyer, expecting to negotiate. Instead, they found themselves facing me, the board of directors, and a presentation of their own financial misdeeds. I took my time as I flipped through the slides. You've been using Montgomery Industries' subsidiary companies to secure loans and credit lines, I said, watching their faces pale. Aunt Catherine allowed it because she believed in giving family chances. That ends today. Dad clenched his jaw. You can't do this. You're my parents, I replied. Parents who haven't called me once without mentioning money since the wedding. I slid a final document across the table. You have 2 choices, drop the lawsuit and pay back everything you owe, or I'll press charges for fraud. Mom burst into tears. But Amanda's wedding put us in debt. We had to maintain appearances. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. A wedding you didn't even invite Aunt Catherine to. Though now I understand why. You were afraid she'd show up in her gardening clothes and embarrass you in front of your society friends. Silence. In the end, they signed the papers, dropping the lawsuit. Amanda stormed out, screaming about betrayal. Mom couldn't look me in the eye. Dad tried one last time to bring up family obligations, but fell silent when Mr. Winchester placed another thick folder in front of him. 6 months later, Montgomery Industries was thriving under my leadership. I had launched a charitable foundation in Aunt Catherine's name, funding scholarships for underprivileged students and building community gardens in urban areas. The herb garden in my office had expanded, and every morning, I spent a few quiet moments tending to it, just like Aunt Catherine had. I kept her cottage exactly as it was, escaping there on weekends to remind myself of what truly mattered. Meanwhile, Amanda's perfect marriage was crumbling. Turns out, her husband wasn't as wealthy as she thought. Their lavish lifestyle had been built on debt and deception, and the cracks were finally showing. My parents had downsized, forced to sell their mansion to repay what they owed. Every Christmas, they sent carefully worded cards, full of thinly veiled pleas for reconciliation. I filed them away with the rest of the evidence. One quiet evening at the cottage, as I watched the sun dip below the horizon, I stumbled upon an old diary of Aunt Catherine's. The last entry made me cry. My dearest Sarah, you think I've been teaching you about herbs and flowers, but I've been teaching you about life. In a world obsessed with showing off wealth, you've learned the value of simplicity. In a family obsessed with status, you've stayed true to yourself. You're ready now, ready to lead, ready to show that true power comes from kindness, not cruelty. The garden will always remind you, the strongest plants aren't the showiest ones, but the ones with the deepest roots. I closed the diary and looked around, at the thriving garden, at the empire I now commanded. Aunt Catherine had given me more than just wealth. She had given me wisdom. And that was worth more than all the millions in the world. The cottage doorbell rang. Maria stood there, holding the latest company reports, but tucked among the paperwork was a newspaper. Amanda was on the front page, her husband's financial crimes laid bare, her dream life crumbling. I barely glanced at it before setting it aside. I had more important things to do. There were herbs to tend, a company to run, and lives to change. Because that, not money, not power, was what real family did. And I finally understood what Aunt Catherine had known all along.